Hi, my name is Adam Shoemaker, and I'm rector here at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in downtown Charleston, back for another edition of Rector's Corner, and so very happy to have with me today our deacon, Greg Smith, to talk about the role of deacons. Thank you, Greg, for making the time. And the first question I'll just jump into. Greg, what is the role of a deacon, and how does that role differ from the role of a priest?
Well, a role of a deacon is one of service. It's a ministry, a special call to serve all people, particularly the poor, sick, lonely, bereaved, and carry out that ministry primarily through the church, but it can be through other institutions. A bishop historically has overseen a deacon, and officially I work for the bishop and not the priest. Mm-hmm. Practically, that's not true because Adam and I work very closely together, but historically that's true. In the early church, probably during the first 200-300 years of the church, a bishop and a deacon worked very closely together to do the works of Jesus, which was looking after people in need. And of course, that changed over the years. But I have different roles within the church. One is assisting the priest and the bishop in liturgy. In doing that, I proclaim the gospel each Sunday, officially as part of the service. I administer the sacraments, assisting the priest in doing that. I then have particular functions within the service, beginning with setting the table, putting the elements, the sacraments on the holy table, and preparing them for the congregation to be fed. I help administer those sacraments, but then I lead the prayers of the people, which is appropriate for a deacon because he or she is part of the community of care, and often that care takes place through prayer. Part of the role of the deacon is also giving direction and some sort of order to the service. So I will, as an example, announce the creeds, announce the confession. That's a way of doing that. And then I would end the service each Sunday by dismissing the people to go into the world and hopefully serve. Carry the diaconate ministry beyond the walls of the church. In my role as a deacon, I have certainly done all that within the church, but a deacon can also bring God's love to other institutions. And I have done that through hospital. I've done it through a homeless shelter and a ministry on death row. We can maybe talk about some of that later, some of my experiences. But within the church itself, I have an important role of encouraging laity to do diaconate work, serve people in need. And so while I feel very strongly, and I know Adam does too, I think most priests do, that those works should be done by laity. I think it helps within the church to have someone encourage and sustain those ministries And so I've tried to do that. So at St. Stephen's, example, we've set up the Sunshine Ministry, where we take food and flowers to people who are sick. We have a very active mission and outreach group where we organize ourselves to go out into the community. And we primarily focus on serving the needs of underprivileged children and trying to support organizations who are doing acts of justice. And we have also created a ministry of communion at St. Stephen's. With COVID, that is a little bit on the back burner right now. We hope to bring this back, but organizing laity to bring communion to people in their homes. I've also, at Adam's direction, become involved in just other parts of the church. Christian education would be one, periodically presenting something to the parish, small groups, to help us all understand the Word of God in different ways. So I think maybe, Adam, maybe you think of something I've missed there, but I think that's primarily what I have done.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful list of your responsibilities. And as you've said, the deacon's role can vary in congregation to congregation, working in conjunction with the priest there. How long have you been ordained now, Greg?
I've been ordained 22 years.
22 years.
All of that time in this diocese. I've been at St. Stephen's off and on for 10 years out of those 22, serving at 3 other churches.
So you've spoken, at length about what you are doing right now at St. Stephen's. I wonder if you could talk a little bit. You've alluded to this already, but if you could talk a little bit about other functions you've had over the course of your diaconal ministry, and how what you're doing today for us at St. Stephen's is similar or different to the work you've done in the past over the course of your ordained life.
Right. A deacon, as we briefly said earlier, can bring God's love into other institutions besides the church. And so I took that seriously. And I felt that part of my call was trying to do that. So I have spent part of my time in the church and part of my time in the world. I ran a local homeless shelter, the old crisis ministries, which is now called 180 Place. And a place of great need, of people who have no place to find food, clothing, medical care, ways to bring back and build up their lives so they can become independent, come back into the world. It was a place of really redemption and new life for people that had virtually nothing. And during my years of doing that, the poor taught me so many things about serving. It taught me many things about how vulnerable we all are. It taught me that we are all poor. It just, in which way? And I then went from there to hospital ministry. I became a chaplain and ministered to not only the sick, but people who worked within the hospital who served the sick. And again, it was a wonderful time of being able to be present to people. I have so many wonderful memories of having intimate moments with people when they were extremely vulnerable and refreshingly open about the reality of life. It was a way of seeing in the purest form the way that God works and uses suffering to bring goodness, to bring strength, nourishment, and ways often that people would walk away from the hospital and see themselves in the world in new ways. So every day you could see the workings of the gospel working, in God's love in both the hospital and the homeless shelter of bringing new life. And so it was wonderful for me to be able to, on Sundays, if you will, proclaim the gospel and then during the rest of the week to be able to, in some small way, go out and live the gospel. And I felt very fortunate. I have retired from that work, but still hold all of that with a thankful heart. I think one of the things that I also have done that really changed the way I see God's goodness is, I, in a very unique way, I was able to spend some time on Florida death row, seeing over a period of time several people who had killed another human being, and also seeing people who maybe didn't and were there, showing some of the injustice in the system. And someone who probably did the worst thing we can imagine is a human being and taking the life of someone else. It was not hard at all to see incredible goodness in that person as well. And how the acts of forgiveness and redemption, while they did not change the act, God worked within that horrible deed to bring back the one thing necessary for life, which is their relationship with God, back to a new place that was fully living and thriving. So I've been very fortunate in my 22 years to be able to do this work.
And what are the other congregations in the diocese that you have served outside of St. Stephen's?
I originally started with Church of the Good Shepherd. It was St. Peter's Church, which is now Church of the Good Shepherd. That is one of the churches that have left the Episcopal Church. I then went to Old St. Andrew's, a very historic church, started in the early 1700s, out near the some of the Middleton Place, some of the plantation country, and I served there as well. I took 4 years to help some of the people who had to leave that church, or maybe I better said that church left them, Old St. Andrews, through the schism, and they had no place to go to church, and they wanted to find a new church. And I helped a priest start that church, and we Lynn and I were there for about 4 years trying to do that before I came back to St. Stephen's for the second time.
Well, I wonder, Greg, I don't think we talk enough about this in the church, about the opportunities that people have for discernment of ministry. Right. I wonder if you could talk about what the process is for becoming a deacon. If you could sort of speak about the ordination process.
Right. Well, describe what happened within me, and I think it's pretty typical of the process. It really starts with something stirring within a person. The way the church describes it is a call. And a call is something undeniable, something that is drawing you, something you cannot escape, to go into a particular type of ministry. It's easier to see this maybe in retrospect rather than at the time, because for me, the call was very painful because it's asking someone to totally change their life, quite possibly. Mm-hmm. And it's a struggle. I think it's designed to be a struggle. But my call was to serve in a particular way, to serve maybe in a way that we can best understand, somewhat like the first century church, like Jesus, just being with the poor, the sick, the lonely, the bereaved. And so the first natural step of that needs to be expressed in a particular way, and I think it's most commonly done between that person and their parish priest. So I met with my priest. Now, this was actually in Tallahassee, Florida. This was over 30 years ago before I moved here. And I met one-on-one with that priest for a fairly long time, read books, discussed, and so that I could fully express in words what I was being called, what I felt I was being called to do. And once the priest affirms that and sees that it is truly a call to ministry, it's then brought to a small group within the parish, possibly with some leaders of the parish and maybe some people of the vestry, to talk through that. And if they feel that the person is being called, they refer that person to the vote of a vestry. And the vestry then votes up or down. And if you're affirmed in that, then you go to the diocese and you go to the Commission of Ministry, a formal group of people that discern calls to ministry. And sometimes it's a call to priesthood, sometimes it's a call to the diaconate. Now I met with that ministry, Commission on Ministry, I think it was 2 times, as I recall, for a day's period of time. And there were other people there as well, besides me, that were discerning their call. But if the Commission on Ministry then affirms the call, they refer you to the Standing Committee, which is the committee that affirms the manages and oversees the work with the bishop of the diocese, much like a vestry does for the local parish. And met with them for a half a day, and same thing, answering lots of questions and trying to verbalize my call. And if they affirm you, then they refer you to the bishop. And you meet with the bishop and go through that same process. If the bishop says yes, then you go on to some theological training. My training was about 3 years. I was done locally. It was organized. In my case, my mentor was Colton Smith, who was a member of our parish. He did an outstanding job. And you read tons of books, write tons of papers, make presentations, things that, in an academic way, much of it. So you can learn about the church. You can learn about ministry. You can learn meanings of scripture, all the things that go into giving you a basis of understanding. And then at the end of those that training period, then you meet with the bishop one last time, and then become ordained. So it's a very lengthy process, at least it was for me.
Well, and an important distinction for people to know about deacons is that deacons don't normally draw their income from the church. Is that correct, Greg?
Exactly. Yeah. Most typically, a deacon is not paid. They serve from the heart. And I think that's a good thing, because as I've kidded with Lynn, it's the only pure thing I've ever done in my whole life, actually doing something for goodness rather than compensation. And I'm saying that in jest, but I think it's a good part of the ministry. So it's and a priest, I think, will use a deacon in different ways. It might be subtle, but because each church is different, the needs of the church is different, the staffing of the church is different, depending on what's going on.
Well, and let me say, for those listening in, what a really important part of our staff you are, Greg, and what a blessing your diaconal ministry has been to us. And for those listening in who might feel the stirrings of the Holy Spirit moving in their life, and who might have questions about whether they might be called to the ministry of a deacon or of a priest, know that any of our clergy would be more than happy to speak with you. Our assistant priest, Courtney Davis Shoemaker, has actually been recently named by our new diocesan bishop to be the new chair of our diocesan commission on ministry, which is responsible for the ordination process. And so there are opportunities for discernment to discern whether you are called to an ordained ministry in the church. Are there, before we go, Greg, are there books about the diaconate or resources that you might recommend that people look to if they're wanting to learn more?
Yeah, there are several church publications that you can find to read about what the diaconate is, history of the diaconate, practical guides to what a deacon actually does, and then even looking through the Book of Common Prayer, there are directions through out the liturgy of the role of a deacon within the service, and you can go through example the right one or right two communion service and see in the wording to give instructions and guidance of the role of the deacon.
Well, and that is a good point. If you're, wanting to be thoughtful about the deacon's role when you come to church at St. Stephen's, be attentive to Greg's role in the liturgy vis-a-vis the other clergy, because he is performing those roles that are part of the deacon's ministry in the church. And don't hesitate to reach out to him if you want to learn more. The reason we are having this conversation at this time of year is because We are approaching not just Christmas, but the feast of Saint Stephen, who is, of course, our patron saint. And Stephen's Day on the church calendar is a day after Christmas, December the 26th, with this year actually falls on a Sunday. And so we'll be celebrating Stephen's Day then. And Stephen is recognized in the church as the first deacon and martyr. And so we will be hearing about Stephen. In the sermon, we'll be talking about the role of a deacon, and we will have an opportunity to thank Greg as well for his service, 10 years of ministry over two different periods. And just because we're thanking Greg doesn't mean that Greg is going anywhere, but we wanted to use and mark this occasion as a chance to recognize Greg's ministry in our midst. Greg, I really appreciate you taking the time in this busy season to have this conversation with me, and thank you for those who have been listening in. We will be back in the new year with another edition of Rector's Corner. In the meantime, stay safe and well, and I hope that you and yours have a very blessed Christmas season. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.